If you use ride shares often, you need to read this before your next trip. I'm from a popular Reddit. 3 years ago, I was going home alone after a night out with friends. I had a few drinks and was feeling pretty happy. When I got into the car, the driver asked me where I was going. I told him my address and he said, "You won't believe this, but that's actually where I live too." He then turned to me and said, "Wait here." He got out of the car and went around to my side and opened the door for me. I got out and started walking towards his house. After about 10 minutes, I knocked on the door. It was black with no numbers and a weird symbol above it. The driver opened the door and said, "Come on in." Inside the hallway was a long table with 2 chairs on either side. There were 2 people sitting at the table. They both turned around in their chairs to look at me. They were both wearing masks. If you ever get an Uber from a sketchy driver, you're probably going to want to listen to this. This happened to a good friend of mine. We were living in a major city and were both heading home from a night out. We got into the car and the driver was super nice. But halfway through the ride, he started making strange comments. He said things like, "You girls stay out way too late. You should be home with your boyfriends." We just ignored him and he eventually stopped. A few minutes later, he started driving erratically. My friend and I were screaming because we thought we were going to die. He slammed on the brakes and turned to us and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't take you anywhere near your neighborhood. There's been some crime there lately." My friend and I were obviously freaked out and told him to take us home anyway. He dropped my friend off first, and when she got out of the car, she noticed that her phone was completely dead. She ran inside and locked the door. Then she looked through the window and saw the car speed away. I recently moved to a new city and have been using Uber quite a bit. A few weeks ago, I had a driver who kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. It was giving me the creeps. So I decided to put on the Do Not Disturb mode on my app so that he wouldn't get a notification when I gave him a low rating. That's when the driver said, "Hey, are you mad at me?" I responded by saying, "No, I'm just tired." He didn't say anything for the rest of the ride, but I could feel him staring at me. When I got home, I thanked him and got out of the car. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I heard footsteps inside the car. I froze and started listening intently. I heard them again. Footsteps. Someone was definitely walking around in the back seat of my car. I screamed and ran inside. To this day, I still don't know if someone was in the back seat or if I just imagined it. This happened a couple months ago. I was driving home from work at around 2 a.m. I was exhausted, so I decided to drive straight to my apartment instead of stopping at the grocery store first. When I got into the car, I noticed a man in the back seat. I immediately panicked and asked the driver, "What the hell?" He looked at me and calmly said, "Sorry, ma'am, but I'm supposed to pick up another passenger on the way. Do you mind if they sit in the front?" Confused, I said yes. When I turned around, the man was gone. I don't know if I imagined it or what, but then I started freaking out even more. I ended up getting to my apartment and getting inside okay. But now I can't stop thinking about that man in the back seat. Was it really him? Or was I just stressed out about my test tomorrow? If you think I'm overreacting, please let me know. A few years ago, I went to a bar with some friends. When I got home, I called an Uber. The ride itself was fine, but when I got home, I noticed that something was wrong. My TV was on and my bedroom door was wide open. I live in an apartment building and I always keep my door locked. When I got into my apartment, I started to notice other things that were out of place. My laptop was on the floor and my phone charger was plugged into the wall. I knew that I had unplugged it before I left. The scariest part was that I was 100% sure that I had locked my door when I left. And even if my key had been in the lock, it was literally impossible for anyone to have gotten in without me noticing. I never found out what happened. But to this day, I still wonder if my Uber driver was messing with me. One night last year, I got a ride from a guy who seemed kind of off. The ride itself was fine, but when I got home, I noticed that he had taken a slightly different route than usual. It wasn't a big deal, but it made me a little uneasy. I checked the map on my phone and noticed that he had driven me past my turn. I wasn't thinking much of it at the time, but later that night, I received a text message from my neighbor. She told me that she had seen a car driving slowly past her house earlier in the evening. She described the car, and I told her that it was the same car that had given me a ride. She also mentioned that the driver had been acting suspiciously. I couldn't help but feel a chill down my spine. Could the driver have been casing our neighborhood? Was he trying to see if we were home? These questions kept me up at night, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was in danger. A few days ago, I had a terrifying experience with Uber. I ordered a ride from a local restaurant. The driver arrived and I got into the car. Everything was fine until we got onto the highway. That's when the driver suddenly slammed on the brakes and turned to me with a wild look on his face. He said, "Get out of my car right now." In a panic, I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door. As I was getting out of the car, the driver shouted, "Don't ever get into my car again." I was shocked and scared. I quickly got away from the car and called another Uber. This happened in a major city. I was drunk and stumbling home from a bar. I remember getting into the car and the driver asking me for directions. I told him my address and he started driving. I fell asleep at some point and woke up in a residential area. I was confused because I recognized my driver. He was driving me around my old neighborhood. I asked him to take me to my new apartment and he said, "We're almost there." I looked out the window and saw my old house. I said, "Turn around." He refused and said, "No, I'm going to take you to your house." He pulled into my old driveway and I started screaming at him to turn around. He finally did and took me to my apartment. Just yesterday, I had the most terrifying Uber experience. I was going home from a night out with friends. I had a few drinks, but I was still okay to drive. When I got into the car, everything was fine. We were chatting and laughing, but then the driver started acting weird. He kept staring at me in the rearview mirror and it was making me uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it, but then he started asking me inappropriate questions. I told him to stop, but he didn't. I was so scared. I tried to call 911, but my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't dial the numbers correctly. The driver kept telling me to calm down and that everything was going to be fine. But I could tell that he was lying. I knew that I needed to do something drastic, so I started screaming at the top of my lungs. The driver panicked and pulled over. I jumped out of the car and ran away. If you want to hear more scary rideshare stories, click the link below. And as always, thanks for watching.